gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy. Remarkable?
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking about marketing lessons from ordinary people.
In this typical town, in this comfortable home, three ordinary people are about to live an extraordinary story.
With the help of our special guest, Voices CMO, voices.com, CMO, Ruth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to be here. Great to talk about voices. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about audio content in general. But first, why the heck did you pick ordinary people to talk about today?
It's a great question. Obviously, it's my favorite movie. I think I've seen it at least 50 times. It's called Ordinary People, but I think it's pretty extraordinary. It's a movie that is really anchored on the complexities of the human condition, if you will, and it's timeless. So, I could go on and on about this movie. So I don't think I've ever done that in a professional context or tried to connect the dots to marketing, but I'm excited to do it today.
Perfect. Because that is just what we're here to do is we're here to make firsts. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your role as CMO at Voices.
Yeah, well, first, Voices, I'll share a little bit about Voices. I've been there just a few months in the role of CMO. I think of Voices as a matchmaker of sorts. We really find real human voices for the world's biggest brands, and they use those voices for voiceover, voice AI, and voice data to train AI models. So it's an exciting place to be as AI sort of disrupts the world. As I mentioned, I joined a few months ago, and I have oversight of the marketing function, which includes product marketing, brand, content, comms and PR, events, campaigns, and then, of course, demand. But if you zoom out from all of that, it's really my job to tell the Voices story and to share our point of view about the market and the opportunity, not just for our clients, but for the people behind the microphone, the talent that is really our driving force.
We're a voices.com customer, and that we've used it for such hit shows as Murder in HR, The Hacker Chronicles, Scam Hunters. You ever heard of those, Meredith? Pretty crazy.
I think once or twice.
How do you?
I love it.
Yeah, it's great. Great platform, super helpful, especially like if you're someone who is really trying to, you kind of don't know where to start too, that you could just sort of get in the platform and just like scoot around in there. And it's like so easy to just find something that's interesting and hear all these cool people or if you want to go the AI route. So yeah,
totally. Cool. That's usually how folks get started with us, but we can scale to like the most complex needs of the enterprise. But if you just need, a scrappy voice for your video, for voiceover, and I've been a customer as well, you can get started for free, really. You can post a job for free inside a minute. So
amazing. Meredith, what the heck is Ordinary People?
So Ordinary People was actually the first movie Robert Redford ever directed.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
And I find that a really interesting choice. He had sort of been looking for material for a movie. He was dipping his toes in this directing idea. And he'd been really drawn to the 1976 novel by the same name by Judith Guest. And he said it was because it presented the broadest canvas. It incorporated more than anything I had read. I read a lot of genuine soap operas, but they weren't what I was after. This book had elements that I felt could be brought together, restructured, so that it became a story about something larger. It could be a microcosm of a family. It could be about people's inability to deal with their feelings, about what we pretend to be versus what we are, about the status quo and whether it's worth the trouble it makes to maintain. He also said, I respond to work most when it's integrated, when the actors are integrated into relationships. And so all of that seemed really interesting to me. But the story itself is about a family's grief and loss after their older son drowns, and then the younger one tries to commit suicide. So it's a pretty dark movie, but really very emotional and just a really deep watch.
I don't want to see any doctors or counselors. This is my family. And if we have problems, then we will solve those problems in the privacy of our own home.
And so Redford said that this project had so little going for it in terms of the token commercial aspects. He said there were no car chases, no sex, no violence, although it's an emotionally violent piece. But I wanted to direct it because for me, it's a step forward. It's a step out there. To a lot of people, it may seem that suddenly I've directed a film, but I've been producing since 1969, and this may have been coming longer than people realize. Too often I've been frustrated at seeing something a certain way and not being able to do it. You can only do so much as an actor. I didn't like the idea of complaining about how much more there could be. But he also, coming into his directorial debut, he wanted to make some really interesting casting choices that were generally considered unusual or odd. Like Mary Tyler Moore plays the mom, and she's coming into this serious role as kind of a comedic actor. And then Donald Sutherland plays the dad, and Timothy Hutton is the younger son.
All he wants is to know that you don't hate him. That's
Hate him? God, how could I hate him? Mothers don't hate their sons. Is that what he told you?
And that was because he said they were as disciplined as I am sloppy. I don't have much technical proficiency as an actor, but Mary Tyler Moore is like a Swiss train. So it kind of seemed to counter his newness as a director, having actors that he could really trust to play the roles well. And he also mentioned that they were flexible enough to take direction from him. But when it came to interpreting the book as a movie, Redford said, I wanted to be faithful to the book, but not too faithful. That's where films get fouled up, where they too faithfully transfer across. And he mentioned The Great Gatsby sort of suffered because of that, the movie versus the book. But this Ordinary People was released in 1980, and to pretty big critical acclaim. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Director, and 5 Golden Globe Awards, also including Best Director. So he got a lot of attention for it, and well-deserved. And I should also mention that it grossed $90 million on only a $6.2 million budget. So did very, very well.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. And so
it's
Ruth,
crazy that this did that well. It's that's really, really crazy.
To have that be your first movie you ever directed, it's it just really, I think, blew everyone out of the water. But Ruth, I'm wondering, you said you watched it. I'm wondering what you think makes it rewatchable. And I'm sure, as you've rewatched, you've noticed more nuance and more things sort of pop out to you. So one, what makes it rewatchable? But then also, what have you noticed and appreciated the more you watched it?
Oh, it's a great question. And I loved your summary. I hadn't read a lot of what you just shared. So I've learned even more about the movie from your synopsis there. I think it's rewatchable because it's so relatable. It's relatable no matter your background or your age or your life experience. It's, I think it's because fundamentally our mark in this world comes down to the authenticity of our relationships. And so the perspective that I'm able to draw from the movie every time I've watched it has been largely colored by my own phase of life and the relationships that have been most prominent in my life at that time when I've watched it. There's always some nuance that I draw from my real life that I, am able to see through the lens of the movie.
Look, we all just want Cal, Con, everybody. We just want you to be happy.
Happy?
Yes.
Ward, you tell me the definition of happy, huh? But first you better make sure that your kids are good and safe, that no one's fallen off a horse or been hit by a car or drowned in that swimming pool you're so proud of. Oh. And then you come to me and tell me how to be happy.
I think it's ultimately about how deeply we love, and that just underpins everything in this world. As you said, it's about a seemingly ordinary family on the heels of trauma, and everything that they've sort of previously concealed or kept under control becomes very unraveled. And I think we've all experienced that in our lives. We've all felt raw at different times. And I've watched it with my kids as they moved into adulthood. I've watched it as a young I was only 10 in 1980, so I didn't watch it then. But as I was coming into adulthood, I watched it. And I just, every time I'm able to draw something new. It's just a very, very meaningful movie. It's not surprising. And you said very low budget. There's nothing flashy in this movie. The movie itself is fairly ordinary. The fact that it was able to be such a high earning movie, I think speaks to the message and how resonant it was and is.
That's so interesting. Can I ask what your read is on the mother too? Because I know Robert Redford brought up intentionally making her a complex character. He didn't want you to hate her. He kind of wanted you to understand her as a complex person, but wondering what you think.
Yeah. I don't know that I have ever watched and felt hatred towards her. I felt sadness for her, but she's not a likable character. I think, she's the extreme version of the person that on the surface seems so perfect, perfect home, perfect dress, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect social circle. And yet beneath that surface, there's real darkness and an incapacity almost to love.
It's really important to try to hurt me, isn't it?
Don't you have that backwards?
Oh, and how do I hurt you? By embarrassing you in front of a friend?
I think, she was in many ways the most shallow of all the characters. She really couldn't love her surviving son. And the father, who wasn't nearly as perfect, who was sort of more bumbling and less polished. And, he's ultimately the one who is able to explore his capacity for love in a much more meaningful way. But you needed her as the backdrop because I think she exposed most obviously what was wrong in the family and what they were all searching for. So she was like a proxy to what it was that was missing.
So interesting. I love that you brought up that it's about love too. That what I was thinking of was like the grief and loss. And it's like that all is what comes from having loved deeply and like trying to process.
For sure. And I think they had to, and the movie begins with the trauma. You learn of the trauma almost immediately. In fact, it's not part of the in real time plot of the movie. The whole movie takes place on the heels of the trauma.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Of that happened off camera.
Yeah. And yet it is the context of the movie. And you have to have, this family might have never unraveled, certainly not in the acute way that it did, but for the trauma. And I think, for all of us, these things become exposed, the things that we conceal, the things that we repress. I do think that trauma or challenge, can make those things more acute and bring them to the surface with more urgency. And, that's what Redford did in this movie, is he sort of made an extreme version of what most families, I think, ultimately do go through in some way.
Yeah, a couple things. So first on the creation part. So Robert Redford at this point, 1979, he is, I would say, pretty close to the most bankable actor in Hollywood. So here's a stat for you, Meredith. At that point, when he's going to direct this, he'd had 3.1 billion in ticket sales for his movies from 1970 to 1979. So you're talking like he was a star.
Yeah.
And so this is his first directing project, which I don't know, we don't need to get into it now, like how he, convince someone at age 43 that he's just like, hey, I want to direct, which is a logical sort of, I think, thing for a lot of actors. But anyways, you make $3 billion in the box office, and I'm sure he could sort of dangle that over other people's heads pretty easily. But and then he doesn't put himself in it. right?
He said he didn't want to be in it. He found his first project he didn't want to be in. This was his first project, and he didn't want to be in it.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And like, I guarantee you the studio executive was like losing their mind. Like, Bobby, you got to be in there. But I mean, you know, like as a marketer, you know, if one of the lessons is sort of like use everything you got, right? And he didn't do that, right? But if he does do it, now it's a Robert Redford film. You know what I mean? It's different, right? This type of film, because Donald Sutherland was not super famous at that point in time. I guess he was pretty famous.
Yeah, I think he was fairly famous. He was, you know, Robert Redford. If there's a marketing lesson here in this little nugget, perhaps it's, you know your superpower, which I talk about a lot with a lot of my marketing colleagues. Robert Redford was, you know, the George Clooney of the day. He had very, very successful movies, and he was a fantastic actor. His movies are brilliant, not just this one. But he was also a heartthrob. You know, he was
that was going to be my next point.
You know, and that might have been a distraction in this story. With all due respect to Donald Sutherland, who is a brilliant actor, he's no Robert Redford in the heartthrob department. He's a handsome man, but you know, so I think that Robert Redford probably had some good self-awareness in that regard. And, you know, some of it might have been that he wanted to test his other skills and stretch into new domains for sure. But it might have been a distraction for him to have been the guy on the screen.
Yeah, I was going to say, so like Robert Redford, you know, world's sexiest man alive for like a decade. You know what I mean? So you're talking... I don't know if what magazine does it, People. I don't know if People was doing it back then, but I think that's true. I think it's a great point. It's like he for sure would have distracted from that. Whereas, you know, Donald Sutherland is like the ultimate disappears into the role type of character, right?
Yeah.
Or type of actor.
I was going to say, you know, he also wouldn't have been credible in the role of the dad. He, I think, would have been probably a bit too young at the time. But there was the role of the therapist, which we haven't discussed, and he would have been completely wrong for that role.
Right. Yeah, there's just not a fit. There's just not a fit in there.
No, he's much too polished. You know, the therapist had to be somebody who just let it all hang out and, you know, was very approachable and, you know, the anti-Mary Tyler Moore character.
Yes. So, and Donald Sutherland, he had just come off of Animal House and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which were two of his biggest movies. And he was in MASH, I guess, in 1970. So he's known, but he's by no means is he a star, right? Like a superstar, you know what I mean? An A-list Hollywood actor. But again, I think that sort of like as we think about sort of like B2B marketing, that I think like there is a lesson there in like finding the right person rather than just the biggest person, and that could be like that could be influencer marketing. It could be the person who you want to speak at your conference. You know, a lot of people, we always go for big names to hear what somebody has to say, and then you're like, well, you know, they didn't say much.
Related to that is the idea that you don't need the biggest budget to have the biggest impact.
Sure.
Oh, he didn't have to hire the biggest star. And yet look at how the movie performed.
Sure. I think that's a great takeaway. Fun fact about Donald Sutherland. He said in an interview that he's never watched one of his movies ever.
Wow.
He said that as soon as they stop rolling, like he has given the character out there and he's like, yeah, I did it. Like my character, you know, is there, and sort of like what they decide to do in the film he didn't say it like it's somebody else's job. I might need to find the quote, but basically, anyways, he's very much like once he leaves the set, like he basically, which is really cool. And what I'm rounding into my point is he is good with the work that he has put in on his character And it's not like, oh, I did my job and washed my hands of it. It's like, I know that I gave it 100% and that character is weird and amazing and cool. And I think that's pretty rad that he just feels that confident about it, that it's like he doesn't need to go watch the film to see that of how they depicted it, because he knows that he did it. And I think that there's some type of conviction that you need to do in B2B marketing. We talk about conviction a lot, but where you just say like, I know that like I'm going to do my best and that has to be good enough. The end result of the thing is obviously crazy important in B2B. And also you want to track attribution, and also you want to make sure that there's ROI and also all those things. But at the end of the day, you also just have to have conviction that this thing is something that you're going to do your best on. And whether it's your customer conference or whether it's a piece of content or whether it's, reformatting your newsletter or, a flight of ads or a campaign, that, being able to ship it with the confidence that says like, this is exactly the message I'm trying to get across. And if it doesn't win the cost per click, like that's okay. If there's better copy that gets more clicks, then maybe that's okay, because that's not the message we're trying to tell.
Yeah, I like that. Something about like have conviction as the expert. I talk a lot with other marketing leaders about the fact that marketing can sometimes devolve into a bit of a crowdsourced exercise. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Everybody wants to edit your content or weigh in on the messaging or comment on, the colors on the website. And, like Donald Sutherland, I think we've got to bring a sense of conviction and expertise to the job that we do, and not necessarily feel that we need to go back and get everybody's opinion on it. I'm sure he took direction and he wasn't a one-man show, certainly, but we are the experts in marketing, and we should make decisions accordingly.
I love that.
So I know we talked about like if he had been in it, he would have kind of maybe potentially been Calvin, though I know, Ruth, you mentioned he was too young. But the thing he had to say about that was, well, one, he said, one of the sad things for me is not finding enough films with the kind of relationships that interest me. This time I found it in something I really didn't want to be in. And so the question is, why didn't he want to play Calvin? And he said, he was too easy, too predictable. He was not a character that interested me because of the passive position that he had. And I wanted the satisfaction of staying completely behind the camera. Besides, this way I could really go off the wall in the casting, or at least off center. So that's what he said about it.
Yeah, I think it's really hard as a director. I mean, I think CMOs are directors first and foremost. Like you are the director, right? And I think that like you are the executive producer. You are green lighting what content is going out there. And sometimes you're the director on the project, sometimes not, but you are a director. And I think it's important to know when to put yourself in the film. There's a famous Jason Bateman quote, which I love and I've talked about in the past, where someone was like, why does Jason Bateman put himself in the films that he directs? And he said that as a director, the highest amount of control that you can have is being in the scene with the actor. And Jason Bateman basically always plays the sort of like same type of character, right? He's sort of like the straight man, and so all of the chaos is sort of swirling around him. And when he's directing, he finds it best to be in that role to get the most out of the actors in the scene. And I absolutely love that. And it's just so interesting that Robert Redford decided to do the exact opposite of that, which makes sense, and trying something different. And like, it is definitely a really different movie, if he's in it, but also it's a different movie if he's in it just from the point of directing the film. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just not just, oh, as an actor, it's different, but also the performances would have been different if he's in the scenes with them, et cetera. So yeah, I just think like as a CMO, you sort of need to have that mindset of like, where do I insert myself? Where am I best? Am I best in the panel? Am I best writing the newsletter? Am I best, being a part of it, or am I best behind the camera? And sometimes, and the answers vary. And sometimes the answer is like, you need to be in it. And other times, maybe you don't. And you need to find somebody that you need to, elevate or platform or give a platform to, or give them space to be a creator.
Yeah. It also sounds, Meredith, like he was very intentional in wanting to take a big swing and, or take a risk. It would have been very predictable if he had put himself in the movie, but he wanted to do something a lot more unpredictable and nuanced, which he certainly did.
Well, I'm curious if you thought that the casting was odd or off, because it sounds like it ended up really working. But what your read was, and do you feel like you would have made similar choices or?
Well, I'm not a casting director necessarily, but the Mary Tyler Moore character was in many ways the most provocative, I thought. And if you think about her career prior to this film, it was so different. She mentioned she was more of a comedic, beloved character.
Great
I
point.
didn't grow up with the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but I did watch it as a child. My mom was a big fan, and she was like a quirky, funny, relatable, character in Mary Tyler Moore for years and years and years. And this was just so different than that, and just shows what a phenomenal actor she is. So I think, that was an unusual pick. I think the first time I watched it, I didn't really think about that because I was a child when the movie was, when it was released. And so I didn't have that frame of reference to say, oh, Donald Sutherland, that's weird. Why isn't it Robert Redford? But, now that I know what I know, I can understand based on the quote you shared, like he was really intentional. He didn't want to do something that was going to be expected or flashy. And I think he deliberately put people into roles that were going to stretch them. And maybe there's another marketing lesson there. I mean, I think when you're trying to grow a team or a company, you always want to think about how you can stretch them into areas that are a little bit uncomfortable, that draw on their expertise. But, you never want your marketing to be a rinse and repeat proposition. You always want it to be a little bit provocative and unexpected. And I think this is a great example of how you're able to do that for people that are even really, really well known for one thing.
I kind of think that it worked in their favor, choosing these actors for sort of an unexpected role, because it got people talking. It got people probably curious about how it would all play out. Yeah.
I love the Mary Tyler Moore piece there of like a total different swing. So much of Made is that, is made of that. I wonder if that's just more of a studio executive thing. Do we care? Did we care that Chris Pratt went from being the chubby guy on Community to being a superhero? I mean, certainly we didn't.
Do you remember when, and I don't mean at all to compare this movie to Ordinary People, but do you remember when Charlize Theron was cast as Monster, as that like murderous mother? And everybody was just shocked because of how she looked. And it was, so different than what she had played in the past. So I do think there can be some shock value there in those casting decisions. I think that if the actor does a good job, then Ian, to your point, we don't care. They just need to draw us in. And it's the most talented actors that can escape the typecast and do something really, really different. But I think that before the audience is even exposed to that different character, it can create a lot of buzz in the market and shock value for sure.
That's a great point. That is a great point. That shock value cuts through the noise.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, the guy from Community is playing Star-Lord? What? Like Charlize Theron is playing what? That's a great, great point. That shock value is something that allows you to cut through the noise and get people to like pay attention.
Totally.
I got to go back to our guy Donald Sutherland for a second. So I did misquote him a little bit. Actually, that he's extremely self-conscious is part of the reason that he doesn't watch his things. I was, a little bit right, but this is a quote from him. It's not easy. It's not easy to know that you're an ugly man. Unattractive is a gentler way of putting it. So first of all, that's iconic that he said that. Second off, he says, he's so iconic. He said that when he got rejected a lot when he was younger, and partially, essentially, he's implying due to his looks. And he said, one of the casting directors said, the reason we're not casting you is because we always thought of this character as a sort of a guy next door. And to be absolutely truthful, we don't think you look like you ever lived next door to anybody.
I mean, he had a very unusual look. He did have a very unusual look, but that's hilarious.
That's a really funny thing to say about somebody.
Hilarious. That's such a funny thing to say. Well, and so the reason why he doesn't watch his films is because it makes him feel uncomfortable, in part, and because he feels like, that his idea of creative control is in the performance, that's the creative control that he has. So he can control what he can control, which is his performance in the thing, and he leaves the rest up to other people, which again, to echo the earlier point, I think that's really, I just think that's really cool. And that's a cool way of thinking of it. The other thing is he has seen 2 of his films, and wouldn't you know it, one of them is Ordinary People. And the reason why is because Robert Redford begged him to go see it. And that he said that afterward he was crawling, he being Donald Sutherland, was crawling over people's feet to get out of the theater.
Wow.
It's just like, again, this stuff is so interesting because actors just put so much of their life into their roles and so much of their, obviously their look and they're very much putting themselves out there. But I feel like in marketing, like we feel that way too, to a much lesser degree, because we can change companies and they can't sort of change who they are or change their face. And so, I think it's just an important piece to note, like, to try your best to make something really creative, that's different, that's interesting, to own your side of the performance. But, then it's on to the next. And if people don't like that thing, then that's okay. They can find something else. Yeah, I agree with you, certainly. One of the big marketing takeaways for me in this movie is ironically, you're talking about like the actor and what they can do creatively and how, different a performance is from the real person. But I actually think one of the biggest takeaways from the movie is that authenticity and especially the authenticity of your relationships, that matters. That matters a lot. That is the message of the movie, is that is at the heart of everything in life. And I think, that's a really important message, especially today when everybody is contemplating the essence of humanity in the face of AI. What matters? What is authentic? What is real? What makes us human? Those are questions that we are all facing, not just from a marketing perspective, but almost an existential perspective. And I think that, many, many decades before AI was even a thought, this movie is addressing some of those same themes. Yeah. I have a question for you. Sure. This movie is a bit of a bummer, right? It's touching on some very difficult topics. Yes. And this is something we don't do in B2B at all. Like we just avoid these, right? Because everything when you're using our software is perfect, and everything when you're, buying from us and the buyer's journey is amazing, and look at the ROI and look at the case studies and look at this and this and this and this. That's not really authentic though, right? That's not actually how it works. So I'm just curious, like, is there room in B2B storytelling for a story that is, I don't know, morose? Well, I'll challenge what you're saying a little bit. I mean, obviously we're never going to, go to market with a message about suicide and child loss, especially when we're selling software. But I do think that the most resonant stories as a B2B marketer are the ones that start with the pain of the person that you're trying to touch. What is the pain that they're grappling with? Now, the pain is usually something very practical. I'm not generating enough revenue. I need to drive greater efficiency. I have to persist my data. Whatever the pain is, but you want to, as a marketer, intimately understand that pain. And then ultimately what you're doing is showcasing how you're going to get the prospect to the other side of that pain. And, in a weird sort of way, that's exactly what this movie is about. How do you get through the pain to a place where you can be a better
a better person. So I don't think, you lead with a morose story necessarily. I wouldn't, at least in my world, do that. But I think you are very much showcasing the pain in a way that's going to land with your target buyer.
Yeah, I would add to that, and I'm working on a blog post about this, was last night, that like brands can't be authentic. They're not a person. It's not a thing. Like that's not possible. But you can tell authentic stories. And like
100%.
And like that's the thing, is like your job is to create the space and capture the stories and then package those and tell those in the most interesting way. A bunch of the quotes that I took from the Donald Sutherland thing were literally, it was from a 60 Minutes interview from 2017 that I just remember I was watching, like with my mom and dad, we were watching 60 Minutes. And I remember watching this thing and I'm like blown away by Donald Sutherland because he's such a great actor and he's saying all this crazy stuff. And, and I clearly think about it, whatever, however many years later, math years later. And what 60 Minutes' job is to create space to capture those stories and to package them in a way that's like really interesting for their audience. And that's like your job as the marketer too. So it's like, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to tell a story that has levels of loss, but maybe one of your customers has experienced something of their own, a loss of their own, a type of loss that is challenging, losing a job or losing, whatever, or losing a customer. Again, it's not as big of a deal, but like the stuff does matter. It matters to the sales rep who lost the deal, who's, has a newborn kid at home and they, need to pay their bills. So like that sort of stuff does matter. And I think it gets back to human stuff, but I sort of like humans can be authentic. Humans can be emotive. Brands can be informative. But the best way for them to channel those emotions is to get the stories out of their audience in creative ways.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the folks behind the brand, even in B2B marketing, the folks behind the brand, creating the assets, writing the story, they are humans. And the folks that we are selling to are ultimately humans. And it is our job as the B2B marketers to make those people on the other side of the transaction feel something.
Yeah.
That's what we are trying to do, is get them to feel something. And there are a lot of different ways we can do that. But I believe wholeheartedly that it starts with the story. The story speaks to their pain, and the story showcases how we are going to make that pain go away. It's a simple formula. But I think that if you lead with features and functions or, then you've lost the plot. You've lost the plot. It's a big, deep movie, but it says so much about life and about work and even about marketing. Like I didn't ever think of it in those terms, but I really do think it's true. It's true. As a marketer, I am trying to build connections and make people feel something. So
I know it's a different age, but 6 million to make 90. Pretty good bit of business there.
Yeah. ROI.
Although who knows what the marketing spend was. Okay, we're switching gears to voices.com, where you spend your days not when you're not watching Ordinary People. It's the number one marketplace for voiceover. How are people using voice? How are brands using voice? And how important is this going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really at the crux of why I chose to join the company. We've got a 2 decades long legacy in traditional voiceover, which is what you would imagine as a marketer. I've used voiceover, you've used voiceover services. But I think that because of AI, voice has taken on even more importance. I think that, today we interact with AI and with brands, candidly, through typing and texting. On our websites, we navigate through text. On our apps, we type into our apps. We message brands for customer service. But it's only a matter of time until voice becomes the primary interface. I actually read recently that I think ChatGPT, one of the AI companies, is working on a prototype of a phone that has no screen. The whole
Yeah,
phone
yeah.
voice activated, right? So you talk to all of your apps, you instruct them, it's very everything's becoming conversational. And so I think that for forward-thinking brands, they're going to want to have a voice that is their own, that is reflective of their brand values, their brand ethos, the same way that they make investments in a logo or a color or a website or a storefront. They're going to want to have a voice that is a part of their brand identity. And that's not so easy to source. You can't, you're not going to want to use what comes out of the box from one of the AI vendors. You're not necessarily going to want to use a synthetic voice. There are a whole host of reasons why that's troublesome. You could have all of your competitors using the same voice. The licensing issues are complicated. And so you're going to want to source a voice with the same considerations as when you choose a voiceover actor, and maybe even more so. It's going to be even more important in this new world. So those are the conversations that we're having with brands. I think along those lines, as these AI models become more sophisticated, there's this frenzy on finding data to train these models so that they will sound authentic and real. And then it's important that that data is sourced ethically, that voice data. You can't just scrape the internet and use people's voices without their consent. Those are like biomarkers that you can't misuse. So there's a lot of urgency around voice as an interface and as the interface of the future and as a real critical element of your brand identity.
Yeah, not to get too deep into the AI weeds here, but if you think about sort of basically why this is so important is coding languages were created so that we can speak to computers. Computers now speak English. So that's the big change, is like you can just speak to your computers like you speak just normal English. And so with that change, it's like now you can just tell it anything in casual speech. They don't just speak English, they speak like fluent English in the sense that they understand nuance and weirdness and things like that. And so, yeah, I mean, voice is definitely, if you've like tried AI, like using voice, it's like really incredibly cool and super fast. And yeah, I don't know about the device thing. That like blows my mind. I think I have to think about it because like it seems like honestly stressful to not have a screen.
We're probably a ways away from that. But if you think even about
it was announced like 2 days ago.
Yeah, it will take years until we get to that point. But I think it's coming. I mean, but if you think about where, first of all, the AI models that power a voice AI experience are becoming very sophisticated and commoditized, frankly.
Yeah.
Like they'll be available to everybody for not that much money in the future. And I think the real differentiator is going to be the voice behind the model. If you think about the different use cases in customer service and, in car assistance, sales use cases, certainly to front end your banking app, I think that there's an increasing awareness on the part of forward-thinking brands. I think this is, we see this in luxury spaces as well, where big brand investments are made, and voice is going to matter more and more in the coming years. So, and by the way, we are super bullish at Voices that this opens up tremendous opportunity for creatives, because the importance of the voice as a brand element is going to grow. Brands are going to want to have continued access to the people behind the microphones. It's going to matter that it's a person behind the microphone as they, if they want to evolve the models, if they want to do live voiceover, if they want the actual person to be representing the brand in different ways. So we're bullish on the opportunity. And, it's an interesting thing for me as a marketer. We're seeing real urgency, demand, but scarcity where it is that we sit. And I think the opportunity for me as a marketer is in telling that story and framing the conversation and really showcasing best practices.
I love that. Yeah. So how does content fit into your marketing strategy?
Well, it's everywhere, obviously. But as a marketer, I always think in terms of two overarching goals. I care about growing brand awareness and building pipeline to deliver revenue outcomes. So all the content that we create at Voices or in any job that I've had, frankly, is done with those two goals in mind. And, we talked about this. It always starts with the story. So you want to start with the story, and then all of your content should be hanging off of that story and not the other way around. It shouldn't be, too often marketing can become like a content machine where you're not really thinking about the story. You're just creating content ad hoc.
Oh, is there any, campaigns that you've done or things that stand out that really like resonated with your audience?
Yeah, I always try to challenge the team to think differently. But one of the things that I did in a prior job that I really loved that I want to bring to Voices, I think we've got a great opportunity to replicate this strategy, is we used to create, my last company, what we called vision videos that were used for our customers to sort of showcase the art of the possible. I feel like as a marketer, our job is often to pull the buyer on a journey, like to show them what great looks like. And video is such a fantastic medium for that. And of course, the video is always featured voiceover. And I think that when you do that, when you sort of show them, here's what we can do for you, here's what great would look like, it's so much easier for them to buy in. So we used to create these kind of scrappy, but very professionally done vision videos for clients that really, really mattered. And those almost always helped us to get the deal done.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. We're literally working on that at Caspian right now, is same sort of thing. Meredith and I have talked about that, of like the biggest problem when we're pitching a project to someone is they're like, well, what's an example of that? I'm like, well, it's brand new. This is a brand new idea. Like, we can take comps. We can say, this is the mood board. This is where it's coming from. But like, ultimately, we got to go on this journey together a little bit.
Yeah.
Like when we were pitching Murder in HR as a series, and we had our comps, we had, it's kind of like Parks and Rec meets Only Murders in the Building, meets Knives Out, we had those things, but ultimately, like when you're creating something original, like there's just not going to be a great comp for that. And you just have to show creatively, you have to push the boundaries. And like sometimes like clients just don't really want to push the boundaries or cede the creative control enough to allow you to do that. So sometimes you got to do it yourself.
Totally. Plant the seed.
Yeah, and just say, hey, this is what's possible. And like, I'm sure you all deal with that where you're like, well, look at what this brand did. They just did this amazing stuff. So, Ruth, wonderful having you on the show. For our listeners, you can go to voice.com and they'll solve all your voice needs, from AI to some of the best, voiceover artists in the world. Ruth, any final thoughts? Anything to plug here?
Just stay tuned in July. We're doing a very, very exciting launch at Voices. So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but it's going to be a remote launch, something exciting coming on the voice data front. So you can, get on the list at voices.com. And thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation. Go watch Ordinary People.
Yeah, indeed. Awesome. Thanks, Ruth. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ruth.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.